Welcome to ADMC Spring Break 2019, the virtual trade show in which you'll find great product values and some valuable information. In this video, we're going to look into the demographics of pet food spending. My name is John Gibbons, and I'll be leading you through a wealth of important data. A little bit about my background. I have over 45 years of experience in consumer products, the last 30 years of which have been in the pet industry. During that time, I've been on the front line for manufacturers in sales, marketing, strategic planning, and corporate management. A little bit about the data in the report. The spending numbers in this report were calculated from data in the Consumer Expenditure Survey, which is managed by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The fieldwork on the survey is done by personnel from the Census Bureau. That fieldwork consists of interviews and diaries from over 42,000 U.S. CUs. CUs is a term which is short for Financially Independent Consumer Unit. It's very similar to the term household, but is more defined in terms of their financial independence in spending decisions. The Census Bureau also selects and monitors the sample to ensure that it matches the current demographics of the U.S. population. Now let's get down to business. As you can see, pet food spending, which includes food and treats, was $31.36 billion for the 12-month period from July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018. That's an increase of $2.92 billion or 10.2% over the same period a year earlier. That's a big number. Let's put that number into historical perspective. Our first chart that you're looking at covers the period from 2011 up to the latest report. You immediately see that pet food is not a segment with just steady growth. It looks like a roller coaster ride. And it keeps moving higher and higher. It turns out the spending roller coaster actually began in 2004. Since then, we've seen a series of 3-year segments with a similar pattern, 2 years up in annual spending, followed by a flat or down year. There was only one exception. The trauma of the Great Recession produced 2 flat years in a row in 2009 and 2010. When we look at what was happening in the market, we see that pet food spending has been driven by trends. Waves would probably be a better way to put it than roller coaster. It started in 2004 with the first strong move to premium foods. This could be the starting point for the humanization of our pet children we've all heard so much about. Made in the USA was next and was a direct result of the melamine recall. Pet parents gladly paid more to ensure the safety and well-being of their pet children. They also started reading ingredient labels, and they haven't stopped. This was followed by the natural wave in 2011, and most recently, super premium pet foods in 2014. Let's take a closer look at the waves over the last 5 years. In 2013, we were at the projected end of the natural wave when prices suddenly took a nosedive. The market became much more competitive, consumers began to look for value, and they found it as spending fell $2.3 billion in the second half of 2013. That produced a net drop of $1.2 billion for the year. This 2013 was truly a game changer for this segment. It began an extended period of deflation which continued all the way through 2018. Midway through 2018, pet food prices were still 2.3% lower than they were in 2013. Now, in the second half of 2014, spending turned up sharply. This was the beginning of the movement to super premium, which was initiated by the 25 to 34-year-old millennials. In 2015, this spending took off, especially with the boomers, as spending rose $5.4 billion in the year. However, there was something hidden. At the same time, the pet food spending of the 25 to 34-year-old millennials dropped. At first, it appeared they'd rolled back their upgrade. However, it turns out they were leading the way in another stage of the trend to super premium, value shopping. For consumers, the super premium upgrade movement consisted of 3 stages. Stage 1, trial. Consumers considered the benefits versus the high price and decided to try it out, usually from a brick and mortar retail outlet. Stage 2 was commitment. After a period of time, the consumer becomes satisfied and is committed to the food. That leads us to stage 3, value shopping. After commitment, the driver for the consumer is to find a cheaper price. In today's competitive market, there are an increasing number of options. Private label, mass market, and of course the internet has become a big player. Now let's get back to our timeline. After that big lift in 2015, those consumers that had upgraded went into the value shopping stage, and pet food spending fell $2.99 billion in 2016. This fits right into our expected pattern of 2 years up and 1 year down. However, this was unusual in that the super premium cycle was not over yet. The benefits of the product, along with the very price competitive market, led to a much deeper demographic penetration of this trend, and spending increased $4.6 billion in 2017. This huge lift immediately after a down year is very unusual. Usually the biggest lift occurs in the second year of the 3-year cycle. As you see, though, the increase in the first half of 2018 was only $250 million, so the current wave seems to be slowing down. This period right here closely resembles the period in the first 6 months of 2012. If that is true to form, then we can expect a $1+ billion increase in the second half of 2018. There are 2 patterns in this timeline that support this expectation. Number 1 is whether it's up or down, the second half change has always been greater than the change in the first half. And in recent history, in the last 3 years, the second half trend has always mirrored the first half. In other words, if it was up in the first half, it was up even farther in the second half. If it was down in the first half, it went down even further in the second half. There were no mid-year turnarounds in the last 3 years. Now let's see who's spending the most money of this $31 billion. In this chart, we'll look at pet food spending in terms of 10 demographic categories. In each category, we will identify the group that is responsible for most of the overall spending. Our target number was to find demographic segments in each category that account for 60% or more of the total. To get the finalists, we started with the biggest spending segment, then bundled related groups until we reached 60%. In some cases, this was easy, but in a few cases, it was impossible. The categories appear in ranked order by pet food market share from highest to lowest. We also included the share of total CUs and their performance rating. This is an important number, not just for measuring the impact of a particular demographic group, but also in measuring the importance of the whole demographic category. You get performance by dividing the share of spending by the share of households. If it's over 100%, equal to or over, then the group is earning their share in the spending dollars. A performance score over 120% in any of these big groups means that this demographic measure is extremely important in generating increased pet spending. It also means that the other segments not included in the group are generally underperforming. There are 6 groups with performance above 120%. Now let's look at these. CU size. It just takes 2. Putting 2 people together is totally important in pet ownership and spending. It shows also that the spending by single person households, the performance is only 79%. In terms of race ethnic, white non-Hispanic is number 2 in share of market and number 4 in performance. This number 2 ranking is the first in the history of the industry. It is the first time in any segment, whether it's services, food, supplies, veterinary, that this group didn't have the strongest, largest share of spending of all the big groups. It could be a sign, early sign, of the growing diversity of our marketplace. Housing. Home ownership. Having more space and space that you control has long been a key factor in pet ownership and pet spending. Income. Income is the single most important factor in spending in every pet industry segment. The move to higher price super premium has increased its importance in food, and $50,000 is a key waypoint. The under $50,000 group is only performing at 62%. That's far less than half the performance of the over 50,000 group. CU composition. Married couples are second in overall importance. Making a commitment to another person apparently makes it much more likely to be a committed pet parent. Age. 35 to 64. They have 64.5% of the total pet food spending. This group, 35 to 64, contains the 3 highest income groups in the age category, and this correlates to our observation of the connection between income and spending. Occupation. All wage and salary earners. The performance is relatively low on this group, 104.4%. It's low because of the disparity in income between managers and workers. Also contributing is the high performance of self-employed individuals, and retirees are spending more these days. Education. Higher education is generally means higher income. However, education has become slightly less important as high school grads with some college or formal job training moved in 2017 to upgrade their pet food, and this drove the performance of this education category down. Area. The suburbs have the biggest share of spending in every segment. They are just barely breaking even in pet food. That's caused by Center City has a lot of households, but by far the lowest performance. But the suburban performance has been driven down by the rural area, which is small, but had a spectacular year with 240% performance. The final category is number of earners. Everyone works. Income matters most, but how many people are working has become far less important. One earner CUs and with 2+ people and retirees both had a great year. Next, we'll take a closer look at the two most important and popular demographic measures, age and income. First, we'll look at spending by income group. Here are some specifics about this chart. We have the dollar figure for mid-2017 in blue. Total 2017 is in red, and mid-year 2018 is in light blue. A green outline indicates an increase from a year ago, while a red outline indicates a decrease. You can get the dollar performance for the year and each half by subtraction. Let's look at the under 70K group. They're up $1.86 billion for the year. Okay, you just subtract 1265 from 1451. Now, to get what they did in the second half of 2017, you subtract 1265 from 1434, and you get they were up $1.69 billion. To find out what was happening in the first half of 2018, you subtract 1434 from 1451, and you find out that they were only up $0.17 billion. You'll notice that both the under 70K and over 70Ks have the same pattern. The biggest lift was by far in the second half of 2017, with just a mini lift in the first half of 2018. To put this into perspective, the under 70K group has 61% of US CUs and spends 46% of total pet food. But last year they produced $1.86 billion increase, which was 64% of the overall $2.92 billion increase. As we look into the individual categories, we see that the increase was driven by the $30,000 to $100,000 group, but primarily by these two, the middle income 50 to 100K segments. The biggest lift is still in the second half of 2017. However, it's important to note that the 50 to 100,000 group was up $1.32 billion in the first half of 2018. This is significant because the total market was only up $250 million in that period. As we look at the change in the higher incomes, both of these groups bought into the super premium trend early. It does look like the 100 to 150K group is finally taking value shopping seriously in 2018. There's almost $1 billion drop in the first half of 2018 by the under 30K. That is significant, but it's somewhat deceptive. In the first half of 2017, this group had a big lift due to the pet food upgrade. By the time we got to 2018, they started value shopping. But there was another factor. They had also lost 1 million CUs. But it gets even more complex. 1.5 million of the members of the group making more money, 15 to 30,000, moved out and probably up in income groups. They were spending over 25% more on pet food than the under $15,000 segment, so this was a big loss. They were partially replaced by 500,000 CUs making under 15,000, but spending 40% less on pet food. So the almost $1 billion drop in spending is significant, but it also demonstrates the complexity of pet food spending analysis. Now, let's take a look at spending by age group. I think you'll find this is much simpler. The only two segments with an overall decrease are the under 25 group and the 45 to 54-year-old, mostly Gen Xers. This happens to be the highest age income group, and this happens to be the lowest. This corresponds directly with what we saw in the spending drops in the highest and lowest income groups. You have to be honest and say, quite frankly, the bulk of the whole $2.92 billion lift came from the 55 to 64-year-olds in the second half of 2017. They were up $3.3 billion. Now you can see their spending basically flattened out in the first half of 2018. Starting out the new year, the biggest increases are coming from the 25 to 34-year-olds and the older groups, especially the 65 to 74. Okay. And the 45 to 54-year-olds are continuing their downward movement. These two charts bring us to the obvious question: what happened in pet food spending in the first half of 2018 across the whole range of demographic categories? We'll try to answer that in our final chart. We have listed the biggest moves up and down by individual segments in 11 demographic categories. Remember that total increase in the first half of 2018 versus the same period in 2017 was pretty bland at $250 million. But I think you can see that this bland results came from some rather tumultuous spending behavior. It's just another reinforcement to always look deeper into the data. Now we see, in looking across the board, that there are substantial differences between the winner and loser in all categories except housing and area. Now, the area winner and loser are to be expected. That's just who we would expect to see in here. However, in housing, it's just the opposite. Homeowners with mortgages are usually driving business, and renters are far behind. In terms of race and ethnic, the white non-Hispanic group had a small decline, and the Hispanics had the biggest increase. It's continuing an upgrade lift that began in the middle of 2017. In terms of African Americans, they've finally entered the value shopping stage after 18 months of gradual increases. Now we see drops by blue-collar workers and high school grads with some college. This comes after their upgrade commitment lift in 2017. Both these groups are shopping for price and finding it. Retirees are growing in numbers every day and obviously increasing their commitment to quality pet food. It just takes two. All pets spending increases sharply for married couples, especially if they don't have their only children or pets. The number of earners also matters less as long as you had two. See right here, the one earner single has the biggest decline. In the remaining groups, we see related segments with similar positive performance. They would be the 25 to 34-year-olds who are all millennials. Married couples are obviously only two people. The 50 to 69,000 income group tied into the 25 to 34-year-olds happens to be the segment most likely to have no children. So you can see the connection. We have 25 to 34-year-old married couples with no children and an income of 50 to 69,000. This group had a very strong start in 2018. Why is the first half performance of this younger group important? Consider this: the 25 to 34-year-old millennials led the way in the super premium food upgrade in the second half of 2014. Could the significant spending lift by this group indicate the start of a new pet food trend? There are several trend possibilities on the table, including clean label transparency, customization, sustainability, or maybe some combination of these attributes. This is unlikely to cause a huge lift like super premium, but it could drive up pet food spending in the second half of 2018. There is also one major indicator: advanced college degrees. This is another group that buys in early to scientific and nutritional improvements in pet foods. As you can see, the pet food segment has become incredibly complex. We'll have to wait and see what the second half of 2018 brings when the data is released in September. The information presented in this report is accurate, but is history. Pet retailers are on the front line of this category every day. If they can get to know their customers better through personal interaction, they can learn what is driving their current purchasing behavior, but they also may get insight into what is coming next, so you could get prepared. That wraps it up for this report. I want to thank you all for your time. Once again, my name is John Gibbons. If you have any questions, you can reach me at my website, thepetbusinessprofessor.com, or directly by email at gbsforpetbusinesses@gmail.com. I hope you all have a very productive show and a great 2019.